Hi everybody, my name is Joshua Pomeroy, and I'm going to take you on a design course using Figma. Figma is a powerful and professional design application that runs in your web browser, which means it'll run on your Mac, your PC, or a Linux machine, and even a Chromebook. So I'm going to start with some really basic principles, show you some of the features in the application, and take you through some basic, easy lessons so that hopefully by the end, we'll be able to create some really high-end, beautiful-looking designs. Let's get started. So, first thing you do, Figma.com. Create an account. You can sign in with your Google ID, and it's really, really easy. So, I'm just going to click Login with Google, and it's just going to double-check. I do have the Figma app. There's a Figma app that you can launch easily, just like an app that you install on your computer, whether it's on Windows or on Mac. But you can also just run it in your browser. I'm using Chrome here, which is my preferred browser. And here we are. We're in Figma. So here's all of my files. It just shows me my recent files. If you haven't ever used this before, this will be blank. So there's a few ways that you can go about creating a new document. You can just click on this plus button right up here. It says New File. You can also, from the drafts, create a new draft right here. Either one will work, and it will start creating a new document. And now we're in Figma. So this is a design application. It's vector-based design application that runs in the web browser. It uses web technology to create digital design, and it's super, super powerful. It might look a lot more streamlined to you if you're used to like Photoshop or Illustrator or some of those other design packages, but there's a lot of crossover. But what I'm going to do is start from sort of a really, really basic overview. Okay, so right from the beginning, once we create a new file, we've got our menu here, which is our hamburger menu right up here. We've got File, Edit, View, all of this stuff. We'll get more into that later. We have our basic selection tool, which is our move tool, which is V. You should be used to that if you've used any of Adobe software applications. And K is scale, which is really useful, especially for text. We'll get more into that later as well. Our next one is frame. We have frames and slices. Slices we're just going to ignore for now, but frames are like your artboards or your canvas, which we'll create one of those in just a minute. Then we have the square. If you drop that down, we have all of our basic shapes as well as placing images down here at the bottom. And that's what we're going to focus on in just a second. We have a pen tool, a very, very powerful pen tool. You can also see under that we have pencil. We've got the text tool. We've got the hand tool, which you can also just use spacebar whenever you hold down spacebar, just like in Photoshop or Illustrator. You can pan around your viewport, so it makes it really easy to navigate through your designs. And then the last one here is our add and show comments. So one of the things about Figma that's different than other design applications is that it is built for teams. It's built for collaboration, much like Google Drive's suite of applications. I'm sure a lot of you have used Google Docs and how you can share a document and simultaneously, in near real time, very little delay, be able to write and share documents and change things around and edit documents together with another person or even a team. Say, this person's filling out a paragraph while you're working on a different one. You can do that as well in Figma, and it does a really great job at sort of managing iterations and changes without getting too convoluted and confusing. That's going to come in much, much later. That's sort of the pro version of Figma. And for right now in this course, I'm going to focus on the simple things that any user can do. The first thing that I want you to do is go to coolers.com, because this is really going to help us choose some colors that we can use, because for this very simple course, we're going to create a frame. We're going to use some of the basic shapes, and we're going to use these colors to fill those shapes. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how these vector shapes work with dynamic fills. You can have multiple fills. So coolers, coolors.co. Coolers.co. This is a really, really powerful and free online application. It's one of my favorite resources in generating color palettes. And you can see here, it's just beautiful. And if I go right over here to the generate, it's the first menu shortcut here up at the top hand side, generate, I can click on that, and it's going to take us to a page. It'll give us some information, a little bit of guidance here. There's lots of different ways that we can go about doing this. We've got colors.ios, so you can even have an app on your phone for this. Fast QR codes, you can even create custom QR codes, fast and easy, for free, that basically take you right to a particular color palette that you've generated. We're not going to mess with any of that. I'm just going to close down those windows so we have a nice, clean workspace. Now, here's the fun. All you have to do is hit spacebar, and it will generate random, harmonious color palettes very quickly. So we're just going to hit spacebar a few times. You do this until you find something that you like. Now, one of the things that I'm looking for is something that has a lot of dynamic range in tone. So something that's light and something that's dark, and different colors in between. But the AI in this does a really great job at generating colors that work really well together, and that's what I like about it, as well as exporting these in things that Figma can use really fast. And I use the SVG export, which we'll get to in a second. So I'm just going to keep hitting spacebar. These colors are a little bit too close in tone for me, so I want something a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more dynamic, a lot more contrast. When you find something that you like, this is good. I'll keep this one. So right up here on export, you see it's that little share icon, export palette, which is also Control+C. Look at all these different ways we can export it. We can copy the URL. We can export a PDF of these colors. Image CSS, so we get the CSS colors for the entire palette. ASE, SVG code, and we can embed this palette as well. We're going to use the SVG. It's going to download it. You can see it popped up in our downloads tray right down here in Chrome, which is something I also like because right here in Figma, I'm going to go back to our Figma tab where we don't have anything in here yet. Okay, and I'm going to pull it in from our little download tray. It says palette.svg. I'm going to click and drag and drop it right into Figma. There's our palette. And these are vector shapes. If I hover over them, you can see I can click on them. I can select these colors. And right over here in the inspector panel where it says fill, I get the hex code right there for each color. And I can even pop that open. And here's my color picker in Figma. It's a really, really powerful color picker. I really like it. You have a slider for the hue, and you have a slider for transparency. You also get an eyedropper, which is I on the keyboard, just like it is in Illustrator or Photoshop. And you also get all the document colors. So now everything, all the colors that you use inside of a Figma document are saved as well in this color picker. So you don't always have to go back and select with the eyedropper. You can just click on it, click on the color fill, and open up this color picker, and all of your colors that are used in this document will be right down here as well. Okay, so we have our palette. It's in a frame, right? We can close down that frame for now. Now let's create a frame for our canvas. We can hit F on the keyboard, or it's that little, it almost looks like a hashtag icon right up here. It says frame, and it shows me the shortcut key is F. And I'm going to use one of the presets over here. We're going back over to the design tab or the inspector panel way over on the right-hand side. And I'm going to make sure I'm in the social media drop down. And let's choose Instagram post, which is 1080 by 1080. And as soon as I click it, it adds a new artboard or canvas, or in Figma, it calls them frames. What I like to do is go to my X and Y values up here, back over in the design panel, and just set these to 0. Mostly that's for my OCD. And now I can pull my panel, my palette over here and just line it up to keep my workspace nice and tidy. That's all I'm going to do. So you do that, get it lined up the way that you want, and then we're going to start creating shapes and assigning the colors that we generated using coolors.com to fill our basic shapes. Okay, so first one is the most basic one, which is rectangle. And that's the first one here in our drop down for our shapes. You can also make note of this. Make note of the shortcut keys because it's really going to speed up your workflow as you get more and more used to using Figma. So rectangle is R. That's probably going going to be the most used shape that you use in Figma when you're designing anything. So I'm just going to click that and then click and drag while holding Shift. That's going to make sure I create a perfect square. Cool. Now we have a square on our canvas. Now watch when I start moving this off the canvas a little bit. You see how it clips inside of our frame because we created the shape on top of our frame. So it's clipping the content inside of our frame. That's what we want. If you push it too far, it's going to pop outside the frame, which is actually really cool that you can do that. And you can move things, what I call the pasteboard or this sort of desktop work area, and you can just set those things aside for later, just like we have with our color palette up here. But I'm going to move it back onto the canvas and drop it there onto the frame or artboard. I'm going to use those words interchangeably because if you're coming from Adobe, you use artboards. In Figma, we use frames. Okay, now what I want to do is some of the really cool and powerful features of Figma is granular control over specific dimensions. Back over here in the inspector panel on the far right side, we have the W and the H. This is the width and height values. And right now I have my constraint proportions locked. Okay, if that's not locked, make sure it's locked. And I want to create a 300 by 300 pixel square. So all you have to do is in one of those values, type in 300. And I like to use my numpad. Makes it really quick and easy. Types in 300, hit enter. And now I have a 300 by 300 pixel. You can even see the dimensions here while it's selected. Rectangle. Cool. Now let's hit I on the keyboard, grabs our eyedropper tool. You can see we get this little zoomed in thing, like a magnifying glass up in the right-hand corner. And as I start hovering over things, you can see I can get a really nice view, a pixel-perfect view of what I'm going to select. And I want to select my first color in my color palette. Boom. And you can see down here in my fill for this rectangle that I have selected, it has assigned that color to the fill of this new shape. Let's continue. Let's create the next shape. We're going to skip over the line. We're going to skip over the arrow. We'll come back to those in lessons later on. The next, probably most common shape you're going to use is the ellipse, which is O. The shortcut key is O on the keyboard. Let's select the ellipse, and we'll do the exact same thing. Click and drag, hold Shift, and you can try to get it just right if you want to. So you get another 300 by 300 shape. If you don't get it right, make sure you go over here, make sure your constraint proportions is locked, and we're just going to type in 300 into one of those fields, hit enter, and now we have a 300 by 300 perfect circle. Let's hit the eyedropper. I on the keyboard selects the eyedropper or the pipette tool, and we're going to select our next color. So see how quickly we're creating shapes and assigning colors, this harmonious palette that we created in coolers.com. And creating these shapes and assigning them fill colors. It's really, really basic, but these are things that I do all the time in professional graphic design, is just creating shapes, assigning colors. All right, let's continue on. So we're going to get into some more complex shapes, and some of these are like smart shapes. By the way, the ellipse is also a smart shape. And you can see that we get this little, as we zoom in on it, which I'm just holding control and using the mouse wheel, we can zoom in and out. So maybe I should talk a little bit about navigation with Figma. Holding control on your keyboard, and this works the same way. It'll be command on a Mac, control if you're on a Chromebook, control if you're on a PC, and you can use the mouse wheel to zoom in and out. You can also hold down Z. You hold down Z, and you can make a selection zoom, just like that. So if I wanted to zoom in, I can hold down Z, click and drag, and zoom in as far as I want, just like that. And I get this little circle indicator here on the ellipse. And you can see as I hover over it, I get a tooltip that says arc. So you can create things like pie charts very easily. Look at this. Look at this. I'm doing this with an ellipse, a basic shape that I can now turn into Pac-Man. I could put in specific values over here for how much of that sweep I want this to be. So creating pie charts, vector-based pie charts in here is actually really, really, really powerful. I'm going to make sure I go all the way until it snaps, and I close that arc completely. Okay, back to our next shape, which is the polygon. It looks like a triangle in the drop-down menu. And if we click it and do the same thing as we did before, click and drag to draw out. I'm going to hold shift so we get a equilateral triangle. And then over here, I'm going to do this again and put in 300. See, this is going to get faster every time you do it. Now we have a little bit of space beneath the triangle, and that's because this is, once again, a smart shape. We have two circle indicators here. We have the radius, which again is our corner radius. We can round this out. And we also have one down here called count, which right now is 3. And if we drag this out, we can say all of a sudden our triangle turns into either a diamond or a 5-sided shape, a 7-sided polygon. We can change the number of sides that this polygon has. Let's leave it as a triangle. And this white color is actually pretty light, so we'll see how much it shows up. But I'm going to do the eyedropper again, eye on the keyboard, and we'll select it. It's okay, it's pretty light. Let's skip over that and use our purple color. All right, there we go. We'll just reuse some of the colors. Now, here's another way of creating shapes. Once you have some shapes on your canvas, hold Alt, because we want to create another kind of polygon, but that has more sides than this triangle. Hold down the Alt key and click and drag your triangle. We're going to move it down here. Then we can let go of our mouse button, and you can let go of the Alt key. Now we have a duplicate of that shape. Really easy. Now let's use our inspector panel again right up here, and let's say I want to make this a pentagon, right? A pentagon's got 5 sides, is that correct? So let's put in 5. Now we have a pentagon. And I'm going to use the eyedropper key and use eye, which is eye, and let's make that our almost black color. Let's see what it is over here in the fill. It's 08090A. That's the actual color. It's almost black. Let's do that again. Hold Alt and drag this out. Okay, now we've got another polygon, and let's bump this up to 8 sides. So over here in the inspector panel, I'm just typing in 8, and then I hit enter, and now we've got an 8-sided polygon. And let's go back to our first color, eye on the keyboard, and choose our teal color. There we go. There is one more shape that we're going to use, and that's the star. So over here in our drop-down menu for our basic shapes, let's choose the star. Once again, we're going to click and drag out, hold shift so we can get an equal-sided star. Okay, we don't want it to be like this. We don't want it to be like squished. Hold shift when you do it. Okay, and then over here, again, in the inspector panel, we're going to type in 300 into the width or the height. Make sure your constraint proportions is locked. It is by default when you hold shift when you're creating a new shape. So 300, enter, and there's our star. Now, stars are also really cool. They're smart shapes. We can change the ratio. See how the angle of this star starts to change? We can do that live right on the canvas. We also have controls over that in the inspector panel as well. And we can change the count of how many points this star has. So if we wanted to create a sunburst, we can also create, look at that. Now we've got like a diamond type shape or like a shuriken. Or we can give it more like one of those sunbursts, like an ad. So there's a lot of different things we can do with the star. This is all the star shape, right? If I want to take it back to normal, I'll just hit Control-Z a few times and we'll get back to our star. And let's choose another color. Let's use our blue color again. Okay, now let's tidy up our canvas a little bit. I'm going to lasso select all of our shapes. So I'm just clicking and dragging kind of outside of all of my shapes here. I want to make sure that my selection envelops all of my shapes, just like that. And when I hover over it, you see right down here in the right-hand corner of my selection, I get this little icon that looks like a grid. I'm going to click that, and it will automatically sort of reposition everything into a nice, tidy grid. Now, back over here in the inspector panel, I can even tweak this a little bit more. So I can see that these are vertically 169 pixels apart. Let's change that. Let's make them 80 pixels apart vertically, and I'm going to make them 40 pixels apart horizontally. There we go. You also get these purple or pink line indicators, and you can see here I can do that live on the canvas as well. So once I put them in a grid, I get these added options, which gives me a lot of control. Let's make them, again, 30 pixels apart, and let's say 100 pixels vertically. Now we're going to use the smart guides with everything still selected. I want to center these on my frame. So I'm just going to start moving them around until I get these red smart guides. It's going to snap right into place. Now I have this entire group centered vertically and centered horizontally on my canvas. And there are my basic shapes with all my fill colors. I'm going to pop open my color picker here so we can see here's all the colors that we used. We skipped over that almost white color. It was a little too hard to see on a white canvas, but it's nice to have because if we had a darker background, that color would come in really handy. So we've got basic shapes. We explored how the smart shapes work, the polygons, how you can change them. You can duplicate things by holding Alt and clicking and dragging to create new shapes and then tweaking those shapes. Use the eyedropper key to quickly grab colors, and creating that color palette really helped us make decisions by creating a harmonious color palette that we could pick from very quickly. So that's the end of lesson 1. We're going to expound on this in lessons to come. We're going to start getting into how you can create textured fills, how you can stack fills, image fills, and you can combine these basic shapes together to create all kinds of things. This is all really the simple building blocks that I use professionally in my everyday work to create digital ads, billboards, business cards, flyers, posters, you name it. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching. Bye for now.